Investigators say McFarland and a second gunman fled the scene. The victims later identified McFarland on video and in a photo lineup. McFarland now in custody, charged with kidnapping, robbery, and gun possession. Ted Lindner, Fox News.
A Texas law targeting abortion pills is now in effect. Chris Woodward has more.
The Woman and Child Protection Act allows Texas to shut down companies that sell illegal abortion pills, lets women harmed by illegal abortions to sue traffickers, and helps pro-lifers stop abortion activists who are hiding in liberal states. Ashley Leonards, legislative director for Texas Right to Life, is pleased.
At the beginning of the year, we were estimating at least 19,000 abortion pills were being mailed into the state each year. And that was through the Journal of American Medicine. Aid Access had that number. That's one of the largest abortion pill distributors in the world. But that's just a conservative estimate because it's really difficult to track even how many, because there's so many different groups that are just roguely and haphazardly mailing these drugs into Texas without regard.
Leonard said that abortion pills are typically taken about 10 weeks into pregnancy or earlier. While the drugs are lethal to unborn children, Leonard said they're also extremely dangerous to women.
We saw the Ethics and Public Policy Center did a review earlier this year of over 800,000 insurance claims, and over 1 in 10 women who take these pills end up in the emergency room within 45 days with severe medical complications.
I'm Chris Woodward.
And finally, U.S. applications for unemployment benefits fell to their lowest level in more than 3 years last week, potentially complicating the Federal Reserve's upcoming decision on interest rates. The number of Americans applying for jobless benefits for the week ending November 29th fell to 191,000 from the previous week's 218,000. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Hey, have you considered becoming a Great Commission partner? If you do, you'll be joining others who believe like you and are determined to defend against those who want to destroy God's institution of the family. You'll also receive some great benefits, like full access to AFA Stream, a monthly subscription to our magazine, access to exclusive donor events, and more as our thanks for your support. Please stop by afr.net/donate today for all the details. afr.net/donate.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Friday, December 5th, and affordability is kind of this newest key term that I think the left has harnessed, sort of like they did with Black Lives Matter and, a few other things, and they're trying to make it something that it's actually not. But this message is striking a chord, perhaps, and resonating with young voters who are struggling under the Biden economy. And this became very open, I think, in the wake of Tennessee's special district election that happened this week. And our good friend Todd Starnes posted this on X, and I agree with his kind of analysis and perspective here. He said some thoughts about what happened in Tennessee. State Rep Afton Ben said she hated Nashville and country music. She also thinks men can give birth, and she gets triggered when people pray to Jesus. So how did Nashville voters respond? They nearly elected the socialist loon to Congress. She got nearly 80% of the vote in Davidson County. It was not enough to beat Republican Matt Van Epps, but her showing should serve as a wake-up call to freedom-loving Americans. Ben campaigned on affordability, there's our key term, right? And her message struck a chord across a ruby red congressional district. It resonated with young voters who are struggling under the Biden economy. But red states are also dealing with an influx of newcomers escaping blue state politics. The problem is they brought their politics with them. And Nashville has been overrun by Hollywood elites and liberal music executives. Nashville has changed quite a bit over the years. It's really not a southern city. You'd be hard-pressed to find a decent glass of sweet tea. That's, of course, Todd Starnes. And he goes on to say most of the diners are serving bagels, not biscuits. You really can't schmear a biscuit. I'm just glad that Minnie Pearl and Grandpa Jones aren't alive to see what the far-left invaders have done to Music City, USA. But let's welcome in our special guest this morning, Mark Mitchell, who is the CEO of Rasmussen Reports. And Mark, I think there's a lot of truth to this on a number of levels, including, the red states dealing with these newcomers escaping blue state policies. We're going to start seeing kind of that probably influx into red states from New York City and some other places. That's going to kind of change up the landscape when we're talking about things like the midterm elections coming up. But let's start with this whole idea of affordability. Why do you think this is the message that the Democrats are using to try to resonate with young voters?
I think what we've got going on is something sort of like existential politics. And we talked about this a lot before, and we don't have to get into it today necessarily, but this idea of the fourth turning and everything falling apart. But, what the polling always says is that the economy is the number one concern for voters, and so politicians always run on saying economy things, and they say what they think they can get away with, and wind up getting into office and not doing that much. And I understand that there's political limitations for these people, but at the end of the day, I like to look at the root cause. Like, why do people keep saying the economy is the number one issue? And it's not just that. We've had all these other markers that just really in the last 4 years have gone off the charts bad. The number of people who say today's children will be better off than their parents is like 1 in 4. That's horrifying. The people who say they're better off than they were 4 years ago, 35%, like that number's plummeted 20 points just in the last 8 years. So I could go on for hours. Number of people who say that housing price is a crisis under 40, people who are unemployed or underemployed. And so we're in this situation where, unfortunately, I think my hypothesis is that politicians just saying things and doing nothing, we're getting to sort of like the end of that run. And so when you see affordability, I think obviously that's the Democrat poll-tested word that's not Bidenflation that they can still run on. And, I think the people on the right have a hard time looking at Democrats and say, well, look, they're running on affordability, even though they caused the crisis. Well, that's going to continue to happen if the right runs also on affordability and gets in and doesn't actually fix the problems. And obviously Trump has done a lot of stuff to get at what I think he thinks is the affordability crisis, and you can see him getting frustrated about it. He actually says the word affordability is a Democrat hoax. Well, no. I mean, the top 3 wealth holders in America own more wealth than the bottom 50% now, and the median first-time homebuyer age is 40 years old. Like, there are so many metrics that show that wealth inequality, the ability for people to earn high-paying salaries, the ability for people to pay rent, all of these things are off the charts. And just looking at Trump's cabinet meeting, I think you can see that JD kind of gets this a little bit more than even Trump does. And I think part of that's because Trump's surrounded by a lot of people who are giving him financial advice that are sort of tied to a system that hasn't really worked. And if you want to get at the root cause, you really have to understand that this isn't just a Joe Biden thing. I mean, George H.W. Bush signed the 1990 Immigration Act that had H-1B in it, and everybody on the right is railing about this H-1B program. Now, obviously, people on the right wanted illegal aliens deported. They wanted a return to law and order and justice and the closing of the border situation. And that obviously has an economic impact, as JD has been saying. But it goes much, much, much deeper than that. In my opinion, we've gotten to a corporatist oligarchy that doesn't really work for the people anymore. And so that was my message to Donald Trump when I went to the White House 2 weeks ago, is that you're not going to be able to just brute force this issue away. You really need to fix it, or they will vote for socialists, because they don't really care about ideologies anymore, and we're seeing that, especially with voters under 40. So it doesn't really matter. And this is one of the things that kind of blows my mind. If you look at the things that Mike Johnson says, he still thinks the LGBTQ thing matters, and it really kind of doesn't. I mean, obviously, it was a really big motivator for sort of older people and more traditional, more Christian conservatives. But, your average voter under 40 is more left on this issue than most people. And when they see people going after these other things that aren't like their core fundamental problem, that's when I think they shift. And we saw this, I've covered this with you, how in February and March, voters under 40 gave Donald Trump a 60% approval rating, which literally should have stopped all politics in Washington, D.C., brought everybody to a screeching halt and said, wait, what just happened? Why did that happen, and how do we get more of it? Because, again, Trump will get the older, the Republican, the more traditional, those people will turn out. It's this low propensity voter, this low propensity big tent Donald Trump voter, and those are crossover Democrats, independents, and voters under 40. And all those people want is a fundamental reordering of the federal government and the economic order. And so when Donald Trump gets in, I mean, I said this on Twitter, I think yesterday, we really need a wartime president this time. This is an economic war. We are at the end of, I think, a really good run that worked for a lot of people, but not for your average American.
Yeah, and there is so much truth that you just unpacked, and I want to go back to one of the things you said about Democrats campaigning on this term affordability, that they are using this kind of broad and poll-tested umbrella term that captures a range of economic anxieties, but without tying themselves to really any one controversial policy, and they're contrasting what they rightly, I think, perceive as the cost of living frustrations. And then they're framing their solutions through government action, more subsidies, not less spending, wage framing instead of price framing, housing. The code is for more federal involvement. I mean, we're seeing that with Mamdani, healthcare, lower out-of-pocket costs, and inflation. Of course, they're not owning that issue. But the narrative for them is to address what young people are saying is the frustration that their wages aren't increasing, but the cost of living is just massively different than it was even 5 years ago. I mean, I remember when, I first was at a law firm when I was still practicing in Colorado, and this is 10 years ago. This is probably, around the 2014-15 era. And, I was thinking at the time, like, $150,000 was like an astronomical, wow, this is great. And I'm going to be able to, save a lot and do all that. I mean, that's basically what you need now as a bare minimum just to be able to make ends meet in a lot of these states. That's not like a cushy sort of sum. You're now looking into the high, 200,000s. And most of what these young people are experiencing in terms of job offerings just aren't there. And so that's why I think, you're right to say that the LGBTQ issue is not as much of a voting motivator for young people as it used to be, not only because they're trending more toward the liberal end of the spectrum on social issues, frustratingly, but because they don't see, I think, Mark, how does gay marriage and the trans issue and whatever, like, unless I'm in, sports in college as a woman, how does that affect me more than the fact that I can't buy a house as a young person? And that's where Republicans are totally missing it when it comes to affordability.
Right, exactly. If they had a great economic plan and they were reforming the government, they could get away with all the stupid Republican things they do. And for the record, I'm completely hard right, against all LGBTQ things. But when they come out and do performative things, when they don't have a plan on all the other stuff, they get laughed at. And that's the problem I think we see now. And again, my message to Trump was, you're doing a lot of the right things, but it sounds like you don't even understand what the real issue that you got elected for and what people want. And I understand, it's a chaotic campaign. You always promise the world. And then when you get into office, it's like, okay, well, we got to buckle down and actually deliver. And what can we deliver on? But he promised draining the swamp and a golden age of America. And the very last thing that you should do is mission accomplished on that, right? That's a big, audacious goal, and people are there for it. My hypothesis is they would be okay with market corrections. They would be okay with seeing a bunch of people in Washington, D.C. get arrested or get fired and cry big crocodile tears. I think the tears are part of the process, right? And then we just haven't seen that at all. We saw coming out of the gate really strong, again, in a way that basically broke our polling. We had never, ever seen a majority of Americans say the country was headed in the right direction. And they did. And it was basically the same month everybody in Washington, D.C. was searching for criminal defense attorneys. So that's what time it is. And the Trump administration got down there It petered out. It got rid of Elon Musk. It really hasn't accomplished anything legislatively. And I know people like to blame Congress. I do too. And their polling is horrible. It's worse than Trump's. And so they deserve some blame. But at the end of the day, you got to wonder, like, what kind of direction is coming out of the White House? Like, are they demanding anything out of the Republican Congress for next year? Or are we just going to do, like, Christmas parties and then it's in the campaign season? You know, the midterms are 333 days away. You got basically less than a quarter of Trump's executive orders codified. Like, like, what is the entire think tank industry in Washington doing even right now, Washington, D.C.? Like, at this point, I think Americans would be like, yo, what about that Project 2025 we were promised? Like where is it? And it's like, then what you see, filling the gaps. That's fine. It was a good cabinet meeting. I get that Biden didn't do cabinet meetings. That's fine. But it's like me doing better than the other guy is not enough to prevent people from trying to get to the next transformational candidate. And the next transformational candidate is going to be somebody like Mamdani. I don't know if it'll be Mamdani. But all this stuff I've been talking about, like immigration, the death of the American dream, concentration of wealth, you know who I sound most like is Bernie Sanders. And coincidentally, in our polling, Bernie Sanders is the only person so far who's actually beaten J.D. Vance in a head-to-head matchup. So that really tells you what people are ready to do. And I think probably across the board on the conservative think tank sphere, you still have a whole bunch of people that are running PACs paid by major corporations that are still trying to, like, get policy passed that's going to squeeze more drops out of the American people. You know, like, oh, we need a new transformational health care bill that redefine blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you need to, like, arrest all of these people that have been regulatory captured and hold people accountable for, like, that's what time it is. And the Trump administration seems like it can't get out of its way and deliver on that. And I know it's unfortunate that our entire society has gotten us to this point, but I just don't think this two-party shtick where nothing gets done is going to survive much longer.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And where do you see, Mark Mitchell, the distinctions and the differences between Trump's first term when the economy was booming until COVID, of course, happened, and that whole narrative versus this second administration? Obviously, you know, the circumstances are different. He's coming off of COVID, you know, the Biden inflation, all of that. And however, I don't see the economy being necessarily policy prioritized in the same way that it was in the first term. So what are some differences that you see of just the approach of the administration?
Well, I think the root causes are way, way deeper this time around. I think in 2016, first let's acknowledge that Hillary Clinton was a catastrophically bad candidate. And I don't think, I liked all of his messaging. I thought what he did was excellent way to sort of like throw a spoke in the wheel of the Republican Party. You know, 10-10, chef's kiss, like it was great. But also, we have to acknowledge he wasn't attempting necessarily to appeal to the mass number of people. He was building a new political movement that didn't, his turnout numbers were essentially a little bit better than Romney. Like, they were still traditional Republican turnout numbers, right? And he did pick up some youth, especially young men, maybe higher on the Hispanic level, probably had a lot less women, especially after the Access Hollywood tape dropped. You could see that in the charts, right? But then he got in, and again, I think just 10 years ago, right, we hadn't had peak DEI yet. It was just really starting. Really the woke stuff was picking up in mainstream culture. Like you could trace it. It started with Glee and everybody getting on Facebook, and then, but then it was like Gamergate and all this stuff that was happening in 14 and 15. And, I think that was like, well, what's happening to society? Why are they all calling us racists? Why is Trump a Nazi? Like, that was what everybody was worried with. It wasn't like, I literally have no future in America. That's what we're faced with now. And again, these problems have been simmering for a very long time. I don't think it's fair at all to blame Biden for all of this. Now, I think it's fair to blame him for a lot of it. But, we got here through major bipartisan bailout bills. We got here through decades of offshoring, a lot of it driven by Republicans. We got here with basically corporations leaning full on into globalism in a way that, I'm not a union guy, but man, like, they literally beat unions. Like, unions are almost dead. and they literally can suppress wages as much as they want with anybody from any part in the world without any impunity. Like, that was a really, really, really bad idea. And we've, I think, finally seen the end result of people finally, like, blowing back, because it's gotten to the point where we have, like, societal decay. And, again, the measures are there, right? The 27% of people say today's children will be better off than their parents. 74% of voters under 40 thinking that housing prices are a crisis, and 40% of them thinking they'll never own a house. Like, these are bad things that weren't there in 2016. So now Trump gets, 75 million instead of 65 million, whatever. 10, 15 million increase depending on the election you're looking at. And that, a lot of that, almost all of that, is Democrats and independents. And again, talk to your average Republican in D.C., and there's no sensitivity to the fact that their politics needs to change in order to accommodate either A, a shifting economy, or B, like a shifting electorate. They're still, by and large, like running on the same thing Republicans did. I mean, I went to the RNC and had a visit, and I didn't really all I got was, our politics are fine. That's not the problem. We just have to vote harder. It's like not a very...
Yeah, just let's go. Just get more registered Republicans, because registration somehow magically turns into voter turnout, and they're not really seeing that gap. And I think what Scott Pressler is doing, is incredibly important. Obviously, registrations do matter, but that's not ultimately going to translate into conversions in terms of, almost like the sales speak of saying, okay, just because you're registered, you'll actually turn out and vote, and you'll vote for the Republican just because you're registered. So, all of this matters, and we got to take a break here really quickly, but when we come back, I want to go a little deeper into some of the problems of this younger generation, and a response that has gotten kind of some prolific play on social media, and get your response to that, Mark Mitchell. We'll be right back with more.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. A vacation with a purpose. That's what we call our tours here at American Family Radio, American Family Association, because we go and we see and we do, and we have great fellowship and fun and food, but we also have a purpose in visiting the places we go to, a spiritual purpose, a historical purpose, and that's going to include our tours in 2026. Here are the tours. We're going to Washington, D.C. We're going to George Washington's Mount Vernon. We're going to Colonial Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. We're going to Boston, Massachusetts. So if you want information on any of those tours for 2026, the dates, the prices, the itinerary, go to this website, wildmangroup.com, WILDMON group.com, and we hope to see you on one of our 2026 Spiritual Heritage Tours.
This is Bible League International. In this season of giving, would you remember that 9 of 10 new believers in the regions of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America go without what's so basic to the Christian faith, and that is having a Bible?
Everyone wants to read the Bible, but many of them will be sharing a single Bible.
If you were among those numbers, you would pray that anyone would bring you a Bible.
When I received Bible from the church, and I really love to read it again. And because of those reading, God is really blessing my heart.
AFR listeners, during December, will you help us bless 7,000 Bible-less believers so this year they can read for themselves the true Christmas story? $5 sends a Bible, $100 sends 20, $500 sends 100 Bibles. Call 800-YES-WORD. 800-YES-WORD. That's 800-YES-WORD, or give at sendbiblesnow.org.
I've seen people being changed by reading the scripture. Giving a Bible to somebody is the greatest gift you can give somebody in life.
Give at 800-YES-WORD or sendbiblesnow.org.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starn. Stand by for news and commentary next. A musical performance group at Kent State University has banned white people from auditioning for certain solos. Campus Reform reporter Emma Arns broke the story, reporting the Vocal Intensity a cappella group limits certain solos to people of color. The university claims giving a white kid a solo from, let's say a song originally performed by a black artist, would be considered cultural appropriation. Mark Phillips has been a member of the group for 3 years. He's a white guy, the beatboxer. He pointed out the ban on white people seemed to be a violation of the university's anti-discrimination policy. He said that music is meant to be shared honored and celebrated. In response, the group's executive board placed Mark on probation, demanded he appear before a disciplinary hearing to plead his case. Well, instead of doing that, Mark resigned. He says he learned that anti-white discrimination is alive and well at Kent State University. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and I'm here with my special guest, Mark Mitchell, who is with Rasmussen Reports, and we're talking about all of the problems with the GOP, the terms of affordability, the housing crisis, the economy, all of this, and the GOP really effectively not doing much to solidify what Trump promised as the golden age and the big wins. And Congress really not following up with a lot. I mean, obviously, I think Trump is doing a lot more than Congress, but could he be doing better? Well, I think so, and a lot of that rests with a lot of his advisors. But there's also, this problem if we've kind of shifted the focus on the right from kind of, the LGBTQ into this whole view of anti-Semitism, the Qatar influencers that are now suddenly posting that, somehow a Muslim country that literally uses slavery to build their city is somehow better than America just because they're paid probably to do this. I mean, it's just utterly absurd. But then there was a clip by someone on social media, Gates Garcia FL for Florida. And he had a response. I mean, he's obviously a little bit older in terms of, not being in the younger Gen Z generation or Gen Alpha, and had a response to some of the young people who basically are just kind of, piecing out and saying, well, I'm not going to vote and, unless these issues are addressed. And I want to play this full clip. It's a little over 6 minutes, but I think that the arguments are worth discussing. So here is this clip from Gates Garcia.
Dear Nick Fuentes followers, I'm going to directly address him in a minute, but first, I want to provide you with some perspective. There's a line you've heard. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. You've posted it. You've liked it. I've seen some of you quote it. But there's a difference between knowing that line and living the truth behind it. Because right now, you're part of the generation born in the good times, blessed with comfort, convenience, and endless possibility. And in that comfort, many of you have grown soft. Not because you're bad, not because you're doomed, but because comfort is a thief. So this message is a warning, a challenge, a chance to flip the script. But before we go further, you need to hear something. Life has always been hard. For every generation, for every man, across all of human history. Hard isn't the exception, it's the rule. And that's not a tragedy. That's the beauty of it. Because the hardness of life is what makes life meaningful. What's earned is treasured. What's suffered for is respected. What's built through sweat becomes sacred. Comfort feels good, but it never fills you. Ease feels nice, but it never satisfies your soul. And here's the truth that no one is telling your generation. Hard is your advantage. Hard is your opportunity. Hard is the doorway to everything you want. Purpose, confidence, fulfillment, pride, identity. You're living in an era where the sum total of human knowledge sits in your pocket. You fear boredom more than starvation. You've been entertained to death. You've been told to find yourself, not to build yourself. You were told feelings matter more than duty. You were told you deserve comfort without earning it. These are blessings, but blessings without struggle become curses quickly. Because when you never endure the grind, you start believing you don't need it. When life hands you everything, you start believing you deserve it. When you've never earned a victory, you don't value one. That's how good times create weak men. And that's why so many young men today feel empty, because meaning isn't found in comfort, it's found in earning. Let's talk about the men who built your freedoms. Men who didn't wait for comfort. Men who didn't wait for validation. Men who didn't wait for perfection. Men who earned their place in history. Pay attention to their ages. George Washington commanding the troops at 21. Thomas Jefferson writing the Declaration at 33. James Madison shaping law at 25. Alexander Hamilton writing political theory at 17 and leading men at 20. Henry Knox dragging cannons across icy mountains at 25. Lafayette crossing oceans at 19 to fight for a country not his own. And John Adams risking everything at 40. Those men didn't sit around and troll people on social media. Those men didn't call people names like boys do in middle school. Those men were strong, not because life was easy, but because life was hard. Hard times didn't just test them. Hard times transformed them. And yet, look around today. Men who spend more time scrolling than sweating. Men who know more playlists than principles. Men whose biggest struggle is their phone battery. Men demanding praise for existence. Men expecting comfort, but refusing responsibility. Life has never been easy. It's not supposed to be. Ease breeds entitlement. Hardship breeds greatness. And here's the good news. In a generation addicted to comfort, the man who is willing to earn everything will surpass everyone. This is your advantage, your edge, your opportunity. But there's another layer, a darker one. Weak men are enabled. Nick Fuentes benefits from you staying weak, from you staying confused, from you staying bitter, from you staying dependent. Because strong men can't be controlled. Strong men don't worship influencers. Strong men don't fall for online cults. Strong men build their own lives instead of obsessing over someone else's. And Nick Fuentes, watch what he does. He only talks about hard times, but he never teaches you how to get stronger. Why? Because if you get strong, you stop following him. Nick Fuentes doesn't want leaders. He wants followers. Nick Fuentes wants you angry but aimless, scared but stagnant, loud but powerless. And then Nick Fuentes feeds you poison. How are you supposed to attract a wife when you're told to literally punch a woman in the face? How are you supposed to be motivated to date when you're told dating women is gay? Wake up. No real man believes this. No real man behaves like this. No real man takes life advice from someone intentionally avoiding building a life of his own. And the most twisted part, Nick panics about foreigners outnumbering Americans, panics about preserving the nation, panics about the future of our people while pushing everything that prevents you from starting a family, having children, and building the next generation. It's a trap, and it's intentional. It's destroying young men from the inside out. Because the cycle is repeating. Weakness leads to decline. Decline leads to crisis. Crisis demands strength. Your generation could be the hinge of history. You can scroll, or you can rise. You can complain, or you can build. You can follow, or you can lead. The world needs men with a backbone. Men with commitment, men with faith, men who build families, communities, businesses, and nations. Comfort is fleeting. Hard times always return. And the moment they do, history will ask, which men will stand? Which men will carry the weight? Which men will answer the call? Comfort will drift you. Responsibility will anchor you. What kind of man will you be? Comforted and complacent, or courageous, committed, and bold? The hour is here. The choice is yours. The nation, our nation, is waiting. Be strong. Be useful. Be men. And let history remember you for what you built, not what you consumed.
All right. So I think overall, my reaction, Mark, to this was really well said. And I think that it is absolutely true, a couple of things, that our generation and our society right now is on every metric still better off than most of human history in terms of comfort, of resources, of, the people who are frustrated with our economy, by and large, are not wondering where their next meal is coming from. The Nick Fuentes followers, they're frustrated that they can't have what should be part and parcel to the American dream, which is home ownership, some of these things, but they're not, literally out in Viking boats and, waging war and, and doing all of these other things that for a lot of civilization was a really, really difficult struggle of life. And so we can always compare ourselves to people who are, obviously either less fortunate or, a different time and era. And I also think that this discussion was meant to be an encouragement to not just complain or peace out or to say, well, because I don't have XYZ thing, I am not going to pick myself up by my bootstraps and try to overcome anyway. And so I think it was framed as an encouragement to young people, but the caution, I think, is that we can't say don't complain at all. Like, just because you have it better off than some people historically, that doesn't mean that there aren't still problems that we need to address. There still, is this kind of disillusion and discouragement. And, I hate it, for example, when, I'm rightly complaining about something that is a problem and people say, well, but look at over here, this other thing that's going really great. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't correlate to this isn't a legitimate thing that I'm complaining about. And so I think overall this is a good message, encouraging young men especially. Don't just sit back and complain and, go to the video game era. Like, actually go out and be the people who are promoting change and be those warriors, be the Charlie Kirks and all of that. But we can't also at the same time kind of ignore the legitimate frustrations of this generation. So what was your response overall to this?
I think it was well said. I think every argument was the exact wrong argument. And to me, it seemed like he was writing his script to appeal to basically people over 60. So many logical fallacies, I think, in there. First off, when he says Nick Fuentes followers, it's not like Nick Fuentes has just his groypers and then nobody else. He's got his core committed people, but his show is pulling 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 views a day now. It's 5 hours of streaming. And he's got so much engagement on Twitter now. I would say there's probably between 5 and 10 million young men now, mostly, who just don't call themselves groypers, but consume his content. Because if you have never heard Nick Fuentes, obviously he says some ridiculous stuff, but it is also kind of an attention gimmick, and it has worked very well for him. And most of his actual core beliefs are really not that provocative. He's a traditional Catholic. He's worried about the future of society from importing people that don't have compatible cultures. Some of these things are pretty core things that are legitimate griefs. And so I kind of see him as a forcing function, which is well, listen, if the right isn't going to actually address the underlying problems, we're just going to make the underlying problems louder. And that's what he's doing here. And then so many different things. Okay, well, I acknowledge that things are better for your average peasant than they were in the 1780s during the French Revolution, right? But I look at these people, and I say their issue is self-actualization. And so, okay, well, they can't buy a house. Well, maybe you don't need a house. People haven't had houses in the history of, well, it's okay, but there are a lot of people in the U.S. who do have houses now, and they're mostly not young people, and those houses would help young people self-actualize. And he says, well, be thankful that you're not raiding people off a Viking ship. Well, believe it or not, that would actually provide some self-actualization for these people. And if you hear the way Nick Fuentes talks, he's actually, I think, the subtext is he wants to be put to work. He wants to be in leadership. The young men actually want something valid and worthwhile to do, but all they get pointed at is globalist forever wars. So that's why they're rebelling. These people would probably love to go to war for a just war, but we don't have those anymore because the system's broken. And just all of it, the whole patronizing, well, you just need to work harder. And then George Washington led troops at 21. Well, the issue there was that there was a vacuum of leadership. They needed somebody to lead the troops. The whole problem with millennials and Gen Z is that nobody needs them. There's only 14% of our elected representatives in Washington, D.C. are actually millennials or Gen Z. It's 60% boomers. And so there's just this aspect of you have this one generation that has really sucked all the oxygen out of America and out of society, and telling people to suck it up is just not going to be a valid argument. I think it makes people feel better about themselves when they say that, but the inevitability is, I mean, we're not just talking really about Gen Z. We're talking about, I'm 46, and I'm a Zennial. I'm right in the dividing line between Gen X and millennials, and I feel like I saw it come crashing down around me. Like I grew up in what I assume was pretty close to the boomer experience, maybe a little worse because of the Carter years, right? But everybody was still cohesive. We all went to church. You could build a family on a blue-collar income. Like it was way, way, way better, right? Mm-hmm. And I've seen that disappear, get gentrified out. I've been shut out of corporate America because of the H-1Bs. I've seen all the global interconnected financial system fail multiple times now. So there really is this dividing line approaching where you're going to have an electorate who is quite capable of literally just flipping the table. And so I think the right way to look at these younger people is they're not, if you actually understand them, they're not like just wasting their time playing random video games. I don't think that's the mode experience. And, you know, my kids are Gen Alpha, but I know some Gen Z as well, and they actually play video games for a communal experience. What's weird about these people is that my generation went through a massive fragmentation of entertainment, right? We had Netflix, we got to stream for the first time, we had YouTube for the first time, we had all these independent games, and there's so many games available out there. But you know what? These Zoomers are breaking records with like experiences on Roblox where they pass the records for most concurrent gamers on one game at any point in time. They all play Minecraft, they all play Fortnite. That, in my opinion, is a sign that these people are actually craving some kind of meaning or purpose, and they haven't been given one. And you could say, all right, well, Nick Fuentes has some bad views about women, but we'll look at the feminization of women and what it's done. These people, especially the Kamala Harris voting people, according to the polling, really don't care at all about families or kids. And so I agree there's this whole red pill movement. There's this aspect of male online culture that hasn't been healthy for the situation. But when you actually look at the polling, men under 30, way more than women under 30, are interested in actually like getting married, having a house, and forming kids. So again,
and I want to jump in just, real quick. I want to jump in here, before we run out of time here, though. I mean, I don't view this as patronizing or saying, basically suck it up and don't complain. I viewed this whole conversation as, okay, it's difficult, but there's hope. And I think that that's a message that a lot of young people aren't hearing today when there's so much negativity in our economy. You're not going to be able to afford a house. You're not going to be able to do this. Look at what your previous generation, your parents and your grandparents had that you won't be able to have unless you somehow, go out and you're one of these gamers that can, stream online and have, millions of dollars of passive income kind of thing. And so I think that the intent of this message, at least how I took it, was not being patronizing as much as it was saying, listen, this is a challenge that every generation has had to a varying degree. And this is your moment to say, okay, the situation is definitely, there's a lot to complain about. But and when we talk about the fourth turning, this whole idea of weak men create hard times, we're in the hard times, but then be the men that create the good times, and there is genuinely hope for this generation. And I don't see a cohesive message of hope being given from the GOP on how they're going to solve these types of crises. The hope has to come from the values, obviously the biblical values, and create that home, create that family anyway, and do the hard work anyway, because that is fulfilling in and of itself. And then, deal with the policy, complain about it, but don't give up hope. And so I think that the whole message here, by and large, is supposed to be encouraging.
And again, I think that that's out there. I think painting all of these people as Nick Fuentes followers is probably the biggest flaw of that argument, because Tucker Carlson, also there's another name that he probably would have a big long rant about why you can't listen to Tucker. But Tucker had on Nikki Haley's son, and it was very inspiring. These people want a future. They want to make change. There isn't a vacuum, though. That's the problem, is that when the fourth turning happens, and I think we went into a great detail, there's a vacuum. There's a vacuum of leadership. And why is that? Well, it's because the people who've been in charge have starved society of order. And these people really are craving order. I mean, I've seen ridiculous things in the polling. We have one where conservatives under 40 are ready to give control of the government to an advanced AI by 55% to 40%. Like, that's where it's at. These people are completely done with the system. They don't think it's working. That's why they say things like the people in charge don't know what time it is. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that you can somehow shape the direction that they are going to bring society in when they inevitably gain political control, and even if we don't have a fourth turning crisis where they have to step in and be the leaders, that's what happened in World War II. You know, the GI generation is the equivalent to the millennial generations, and they're the one that were captains and majors and colonels, and then formed, our golden age of corporate America after World War II. That was people filling a vacuum when a crisis needed them, and we don't have that vacuum yet. What we have is people who are entrenched, just telling this younger generation, well, you're doing it wrong. Well, you raised them. Like, you know what I mean? Like
but I mean, I think there is some truth to that. And we only have about a minute left, and I wish that we had longer on this, because I think that we're getting kind of, to a precision moment that I wish that we had more time. But, I agree with you that we don't quite yet have that vacuum, but I don't think it's just a matter of kind of like browbeating the young generation, like, do something different. It's more of, the encouragement of saying, this is a difficult time. Let's have solutions. We want to hear from you. But I do think that there is a vacuum of strong, values-based, moral male leadership, and that was further created with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Like, he was one that could actually speak to the young generation, hear them, and respond with truth, and not just in policy, but always bring it back to, this is what ultimately leads to happiness and prosperity, or, the biblical values, and let's reshape this society. And it was definitely more motivational and hopeful than what you see from some of these artificial leaders that are being propped up, like the Nick Fuentes, the Andrew Tates, and some of those, and the Tucker Carlsons, when there's an absence of strong male biblical leadership. So again, we only have about 45 seconds, so I'll give you the last closing comments, Mark.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There's a whole third way Christianity and what's been going on in the church. But I will just say, yes, Charlie Kirk had a really, really, really good message, and it resonated with a lot of people. And I think that that's proof, especially with how popular J.D. Vance is, that's proof that there are people, younger people, that are giving a message of hope and inspiration for these folks. But you can also acknowledge that they're kind of wrestling with essentially a larger matrix. We are still living in the matrix, and the young people know it, and the old people kind of don't really. And that's going to shift really, really fast, I think, in the coming years, like maybe just 5.
Well, we'll continue to talk about it more, and I really appreciate the insights, and I think there is a lot to unpack here. But Mark Mitchell, really appreciate it so much. You can follow him on X. I'd encourage you to do that. We'll be right back with more.
The biblical principles our nation was founded upon are under attack.
They're trying to change the whole course of our understanding about the way things are about our own country.
Sandy Rios.
They're trying to untether us from our Constitution and certainly from our God.
Trust Sandy Rios to bring you unfiltered, insightful commentary from a Christian worldview. Find her podcast titled Sandy Rios 24/7 online at afr.net.
The Middle East, that's one part of the world we need to pay attention to, especially the country of Israel. Each week, I'll help you make sense of what's happening in that region through a biblical lens. I'll bring you important information about security threats, archaeological discoveries, biblical prophecy, ministries happening on the ground, and much more. I'm John Riley. Join me for the Middle East Report Special Edition every Saturday at 6:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio as I connect you to the people, places, and geography of what we read in God's Word.
Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not even listen to the sound of your harps. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. The prophet Amos confronted Israel for ceremonial worship that was not reflected in their hearts or lifestyles. God said to them, I reject your festivals. Take away from me the noise of your songs. Just because we offer something as worship doesn't mean that God accepts it. He is looking for a worship that emanates from hearts of contrition. Circumcision of the heart is our Lord's desire. We must strive to be a people who lift up holy hands in worshipful melody before the Lord that accurately reflects our heart conditions, demonstrable in how we live.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
If you are 65 or older, you know this, inflation is hitting everyone hard right now, especially when it comes to healthcare. Over the last 10 years, healthcare costs have skyrocketed by, get this, 230%. If you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are still out-of-pocket expenses like deductibles and copayments, and they really add up. But here's some good news. MediShare 65 Plus is designed to fill in those gaps and help protect you from rising healthcare costs. At only $99 per month up to age 75, you get peace of mind at a price you can afford. And MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around 30 years. It's not some big impersonal thing. It's a community of people helping each other, business owners, pastors, retirees. People love it. MediShare 65 Plus just makes sense. To learn more, give them a call. They're great to talk to. They'll offer to pray with you each time you call, too. Call now. 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And just a real quick last few minutes in this segment to kind of, continue ranting about this topic. I think there's a lot of truth to what Mark Mitchell is saying. I think there's a lot of truth to what Gates Garcia was saying. And it's interesting, and we were talking in the break, Mark Mitchell and I, that, the response to this video was actually quite telling. We had people like the David Limbaugh's, who's a very dear friend of mine, and that's actually how I came across this video, was he posted and said, this is brilliant, and, this is great, and I love this. And obviously is in, not in, the Gen Z generation. And then you have people in the comments who are totally mocking this guy because they're younger. But I think that shows the attitude of young people that they just really don't want to hear that kind of encouragement, and that it's their responsibility. They want to see solutions before they actually have a buy-in. And I think there is some legitimacy to that, but then there is also some legitimacy to the older generations, not just being, kind of put out to pasture and saying, well, since you're not growing up how we did, what you have to say absolutely doesn't matter. The worst thing that young people do with their youth is to not listen to the older, wiser generation who genuinely has been there, done that, in a lot of different areas. And of course, with our AFR family, I'm speaking to a lot of you who are the been there, done that generation, and it may have looked slightly different. And, everybody's life experience is, of course, different and unique in different ways. But the fundamental principles of the Bible, the truth of first principles, those things are eternal and don't change. And so I think what Charlie Kirk framed so well was how, regardless of the thing of the day, the current problem or everybody's, specific situation, we all can go to the truth of Scripture. I mean, the Bible doesn't speak to everyone's completely unique, different circumstances. Otherwise, the Bible would be, massively large, right? I mean, it doesn't give specific go do XYZ in every single economic or personal situation. It gives principles by which we derive certain truths of prohibited ways of action and things that we are commanded to do. And then within that, there is wisdom and there is the will of God. I mean, things that we are supposed to do is pray without ceasing. That is a command to all Christians, right? We are supposed to be members of the institutions that God has ordained, which are the church government, the family government, the civil government. Now, can those institutions, because they are populated by human beings, fail? Yes, but that doesn't mean that we just abandon them completely or that we just sit back and complain about it and say, well, our parents and grandparents had it so much better, and look at this economy. I'm never going to be able to afford a house, and so therefore I have no personal responsibility in this situation. I think that's the wrong message to send to young people, that somehow they can't at least attempt to overcome and to do as much as lies within them to pursue the best opportunity that they have. And it may be more limited than they would like, but that's been true throughout world history, that there are just certain life circumstances that are frustrating that we would like to change, or, setbacks. I mean, even friends of mine or my parents, have said, as soon as we think we have money to do, this other special project, then, the dishwasher breaks and we have to replace it. And that's frustrating, or the car breaks down or whatever. I mean, these are things that are part of every generation. And it's not to trivialize or to diminish the importance of the concerns of young people. It's to say there are things and principles that transcend the temporal problems of our day that you can reach higher than that. And I think what Gates Garcia was pointing out was saying, go be the warrior, go be the masculine man, go be the feminine woman, go be who God is calling you to be in spite of your circumstances. That's the message and the hope, really, of the truth of the gospel of Christ. And that is where we can genuinely have hope in spite of our circumstances. I mean, Paul didn't say, well, sorry, I can't do ministry. I'm in chains in prison, and, it's a real bummer, guys. And until my circumstances change and, the government system changes, well, I'm just going to sit around and complain about it. No, he did the work that he was called to do anyway. And even if we don't have the exact situation that we would prefer, that doesn't stop us from enjoying, especially at this season of Advent, the blessings that God has given to us. I mean, we are genuinely so blessed to live in this country and have a lot more comfort and privilege, to use that word, than so many people throughout human history. And there needs to at least be that kind of acknowledgement and that reaching higher than just the complaints and saying, well, because I don't have it as good as the sort of romanticized era of my father and grandparents, then that means that I can just sit back and complain. And I don't think that a lot of young people are only complaining. They just aren't directed as to how to engage. And that was the brilliance of Charlie Kirk. He gave them tasking that is biblically based that anyone can do. Go get married, go have a family, go work hard, go be the man of your home, go be, the wife and mother of your home, go be in ministry if you are a single person, and then you too can experience the joys that God has set before you. Run your race with perseverance. That is the ultimate hope that we have. As always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American